welcome back to the Move Better podcast. I am Dr. Joe and John Penisarada, the professor at SFSU, and we are here to talk to you today about the effects of movement on heart health. Getting into it, the risks of cardiovascular disease. And I have a few stats on here from the World Health Organization. I won't go too detailed into that type of stuff though, but it is the number one cause of death globally. Cardiovascular disease is one of the number one causes of death globally. And again, these are all just statistics from the WHO. Out of the WHO. Out of 17 million premature deaths at the age of 70, under the age of 70, due to non-communicable diseases in 2019, 38% were caused by cardiovascular diseases. Most cardiovascular diseases can be prevented by addressing just behavioral risks, such as exercise, and that's what we're going to be getting into today. And one of the stats that they have on there that we should be talking about is one of the final stats. If you just Google this, it is important to detect cardiovascular diseases as early as possible, so management with counseling and medicines can begin. Right? So that the narrative is
counseling
already
and
into
medicine.
that.
Okay.
Counseling and medicine. So counseling, I'll take that.
Okay.
But when it's already jumping right into medicines, that's when I start to have a little bit of an issue, because when it really comes down to is our medicine that we should be looking at is prevention, right? And to prevent heart disease is probably the best route to go, and that's where the counseling really comes in. But too often are we looking for that quick pill? Oh yeah. Are we looking for that quick way of fixing this? Oh, I have heart disease, so you know what? Get me on some type of medication. Get me on some type of blood pressure medication. Get me on something that's going to heal me and fix me, so that way I don't have to worry about that type of stuff.
Yeah, I think we all know, especially people that are somewhat older than us, they're already accepting the fact that they're going to have to take some kind of medication for blood pressure, cholesterol, which are all related to cardiovascular diseases, right? Yeah. And so, but what is the underlying causes of these things? And it's usually lifestyle changes or lifestyle period. And in actuality, that's what we should look into. What are the lifestyles of most people that needs to change and adapt so that they can reduce the risk of cardiovascular diseases and have a better heart?
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, I get it. It's completely difficult for people to make lifestyle changes, and that's where the counseling does come in. But understand that nothing is fixed so quickly with supplementation or any type of medication. You've got to put the work in.
Absolutely.
And something that we talked about before was you got to get off your ass. You got to get something going for yourself. Make some lifestyle changes, and it doesn't have to be so hard, so fast, right away.
Not at all.
Small little changes and consistency is what we're looking at, right? Yeah. I have patients that come in all the time and talk about, they're pre-diabetic and their blood sugar levels are all through the roof, and their blood pressure is really high, and what kind of changes can we utilize in order to make changes now, right? And too often, too soon, and this is something that we're going to get into a little bit later also, is the extreme. People jump into the extremes of things, dieting, cardio, exercise. They do so much with movement too fast without taking their time to build from that, and that's where the problems start to come in.
Again, the quick fix.
The quick fix, the quick fix things. So, and nothing's going to be, not a lot of changes are going to happen within 2 weeks. Not a lot of changes are going to happen within 6 weeks. Right. We're looking at lifestyle changes that make the biggest difference, right? And in order to do that, we need to start slow. We need to take our time because we need to get into that habit, the power of habit, right? Yeah.
Remember, COVID 2020. I think I came to your garage at, April 2020? March?
Yeah.
My blood pressure, 180 over 115. And I was like, oh, man.
Yeah.
You know, they say that there's no symptom, right, for blood pressure. I didn't feel right.
Yeah.
So whatever they said, there was no symptom. I felt some kind of symptom. So if you remember that,
If we could get
crazy.
a picture of John on this, if we could get a picture of John's before and after,
Yo.
and this is just April
Instagram.
2020. And mind you,
it's on my Instagram page.
John and I have been in this business for a long time. John in the 90s, we've been in the fitness industry. We've been studying this stuff since the 90s. And for me in 2001, and we were kind of hard-headed when it came down to it, right? And what trainer wasn't,
Oh, yeah.
hard-headed and
were
thinking that they had all the answers
We
in the
were in
world.
our early 20s, man. We thought we knew everything.
We thought we knew it all, and
Yeah.
that kind of carried in. And in 2020, John reached out to me in April, and his blood pressure was high.
Crazy high. I was like, what
I'm
the hell
pretty
is
safe
going
to say it
on?
was overweight. He was overweight. He would work out though, but he would weight lift. It was all strength training, right? And I
All
remember you
strength
being in
training.
the
I was
gym
doing
all the
HIIT.
time.
I
You
was-
doing a lot of HIIT training, and those are things that we had to break down. And John and I had a long conversation, and it wasn't just one conversation. We had multiple conversations. And mind you, this is my mentor. This is the guy that has carried me over into the health industry because I wanted to change directions at one point in my life, and he's the one that kind of kept me there. When after I got out of school, we sat down together and we started just like hammering things out. And we came together as a team rather than me telling him certain things. We knew a lot about it, and we started just doing research on ourselves. And we started talking about things that we needed to do for his blood pressure, his weight management.
Yeah, mind
and what
you,
did it come down to?
Well, I was already getting prescribed medication, right?
Yeah.
But I'm kind of stubborn in that sense. But just to quickly go through what happened, it was April. By June, blood pressure was normal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
April, May, June. That's
3 months.
3 months, right? We did some major changes. A lot of it was to really assess what my current lifestyle was like. I was working out, but I think I was overly stressed. COVID was happening. My training maybe was not necessarily conducive to what I was experiencing in my health. And we just made some pretty simple tweaks.
Yeah.
When I say simple, it could be big changes for most people.
Yeah.
But for me, it was very simple.
And you did papers on this. You did research
Yes.
on cardiovascular
Yeah.
health,
Yeah.
and that's
HIIT
where
training, I did research on that.
Yeah.
And so that's why I was doing a lot of HIIT. And again, it's not that HIIT is not right for cardiovascular disease. For cardiovascular, absolutely, it's right for it. But for me at the time, we had to sit back and okay, what's happening and why are you
we're
at
taking
this?
the individual. Yeah.
Right. And so it was so simple.
Yeah. I mean, what was the first prescription that we came up with?
The first thing we did was I walked every day.
Walk an hour.
I walked every day.
Walk an hour. Then we said that,
I
right?
walked. I was just like, all right. And from your house to my house, I would
Yeah.
just walk, which is almost like 2 miles. I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna walk. Right?
And there's so much in that, right? There's so much in just walking that people don't understand and people don't get, right? It just seems too easy.
The most underrated exercise, I always say, is
Exactly.
walking, right? And I think, now, all the clients I work with, I just tell them, okay, first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna walk.
Yeah.
And they're looking at me like, walk? Yeah. Well, how often do you walk for at least 30 minutes nonstop?
Yeah. The first client I ever had, he just got out of cardiac surgery.
Uh-huh.
First client, 2001, November 2001. He comes out, and 24 Hour Fitness gave me my client, and it was just one of those things where they're like, "Hey, go and see this client." They gave me all of his risk factors, and at that time, 24 Hour Fitness really trained you. They put you through classes, trainers through classes, their own certification classes.
Yep.
And I remember going in there and seeing the guy and going, what the hell am I going to do with you? All right, hop on the treadmill.
Let's go walk.
Hop on the treadmill because I wasn't going to pump his heart with a bunch of strength training. And little did I know that was actually the proper prescription.
Right. That's actually what you should do nowadays.
For him. But
back
putting
then-
him on there, he was looking at me like, this is all I'm going to do. And I'm like, yeah, this is all you're going to do.
Yeah.
I'm just going to stand here and talk with you and walk. And then he never came back to me because he was just like, this is stupid. Why am I going to just do some walking?
Well,
But
because that's the perception. Right?
Exactly.
I got to go and kill myself, go do all this crazy, marathons and half marathons. No knock on that. But
No.
when we're talking about just improving your health,
Just to start.
walking is so underrated.
Yeah.
So underrated.
Yeah.
So what I did, 30 minutes minimum, 60 seconds most of the time, at least 5 days a week if I can.
Yeah.
If not every day. And
Yeah.
that made a huge difference already. Not only from the mechanism of the cardiovascular system, but also being mindful and also helping with stress relief.
Exactly.
So huge. And when it comes down to the whole cardiovascular health, heart health, people suffering from heart attacks, strokes, those two things I just mentioned is what it's all about.
Yeah.
Reducing your stress and improving your cardiovascular mechanism function.
Exactly.
That's it, right?
And that brings us to the topic, like what are the common risk factors for cardiovascular diseases, right? And some of the solutions that we'll be coming up with for some of these will be a little bit later on, but most of our talk today will be more on the activity side of things.
Yeah.
But diet,
huge.
inactivity, that's what we're going to be talking about.
Huge, yep.
Stress, we're going to be talking about.
Yep.
We got tobacco use, alcohol use. I would say alcohol is still underneath the dietary side of things, but tobacco, tobacco uses and vaping. Some of these things may be outdated, but with the new things that are out there right now are vaping. And kid vaping, child vaping, and there's flavors, and I think California was one of the first states in the country to ban flavored vape.
Yeah.
And I was never a big fan of it. I've tried it before.
Yeah.
But I was like, man, okay. One of my brother was big on it, and he was like, no, it's only vape, guys. And now he's completely addicted to it, right?
It burns.
Shit hurts, man. I know. I never personally liked it, but you know what? You're putting things in your lungs, man. It's still going to affect you. Now, I'm not an expert at the lung health, but understanding that you're still putting shit in your lungs. You're still whether it's vape or whatever it is, it's still going toxin inside, and you're putting a toxin inside your system. And then the last one, and I tie this into stress also, is sleep.
Sleep, whoo, huge.
So
huge.
These are the topics that we're going to be focusing on, and how can we just utilize movement to get to where we need to be to decrease the risk, prevent heart disease, right?
Yeah.
And get you guys into more solutions. How can we create more solutions for you guys rather than just constantly talking about it?
Yeah.
Cool. So, comparisons of conditioning. That's what I kind of wanted to talk about.
Types of cardio.
Because inactivity is a big one, all right, and getting out there. And we talked about walking and the effects of walking. The effects of walking is really underrated, like we said. The effects of it can also help with stress levels, and that's going to be for our next podcast, is going to be talking about stress and the effects of stress on your health and what we can do about those, some simple solutions for that. And there's different types of stress out there, so we're going to talk about all of that on our next episode. But cardiovascular health, right?
Yeah.
When we want to do cardiovascular exercise for health, what are the types of what types of exercises are out there?
Different modalities?
Different modalities that we can utilize to help cardiovascular health.
So the most common thing about cardiovascular exercises, right? You think about aerobics or aerobic. What does aerobic mean? Aerobic means basically when you're utilizing oxygen more on an oxidative level, so that you utilize that for energy and your physiological systems, so that we can get that deep into it, but I don't want to go too far into the physiology of it. But basically, you do get a little out of breath, but not too much, and you're taking in more oxygen than you normally would, right? So if you do that in a certain amount of time frame on the daily, it does trigger adaptations where your heart cardiovascular system becomes more efficient.
Yeah.
Right? On a mechanism-wise, it keeps the endothelial walls, which are the walls of the arteries, from stiffening. Because when that stiffens, that's when you have issues with the whole system, right? You're not getting blood flow through. Your blood pressure starts rising up. It can actually trigger more, calcium buildup in the system. And
now, let me stop you really quick from there. Just to get you guys a little bit more perspective. endothelial walls in arteries, they're pliable, right? They are nerve innervated. They move. They pump.
Yep.
And so they can close up. They close up and they open up, and there's nerves that actually control that, right? The autonomic nervous system, and that's another question later on that we can go through.
Yep.
Heart rate variability and the autonomic nervous system and how that all works. But we're not going to get too detailed into that because we know that.
We'll keep it simple.
Yeah, we're going to keep it as simple as possible here. But with the endothelial walls, like he was talking about, cardiovascularly, we want to kind of keep it moving, right? Just like your body, we always want to get it pumping, moving around, letting it open up, letting it close down.
Yep.
So we don't want any stiffening, which is a part of that cardiovascular health or the cardiovascular diseases. Stiffening, plaque buildup, that's something that we want to keep clear. It's almost like the highways, right? You always want to make sure that those highways, traffic keeps moving. If it starts to slow down, that's where cardiovascular diseases come in.
And so that's why movement. And so that's why movement helps with that, keeping that pliable, right? So when you think about that, what types of things can we do to convert or allow the body to take in more oxygen through activity, right? So we mentioned walking. So when we say walking, this is more what we call a steady state activity, where your heart rate will probably pick up 50 to 60% of what your normal or what your maximum is. So let's say a person's maximum heart rate gets up to like 200 beats a minute. Okay, this is just an example. So if you want a steady state exercise that will improve your aerobics and cardiovascular, you have to get your system to be about 60, 64, 65% minimum. Okay, and by walking,
65% of 200.
Of 200, right? If that's the person's maximum heart rate. So when you get to that point, the idea is to stay in that range with whatever activity it is, whether it's walking, it could be swimming, it could be cycling, right? You keep your heart rate at that range for a good amount of time. Say 20 minutes to 60, right? Or 30 seconds to 60 seconds. 30 minutes to 60 minutes. You're like, whoa, 60 seconds only? Cool.
Yeah.
No, minutes. And that has an effect of improving your cardiovascular system. Now, again, the what you have to think about is moderate. It's moderate. It's not that high of an intensity. It's, again, 64, 65%, and it's for a longer duration, right? So that's one type of aerobics, type of cardiovascular exercise activity. So again, walking, swimming, if you're a conditioned swimmer, cycling, if you're a conditioned cycling, jogging for some, right? Depends on what level you're in. For most of us, walking is good enough.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because, think about like how inactive our population is. So literally walking, helping with the stress levels and the cardiovascular system is great. The other type would be what we've been hearing for the last, 10 years or more, right? It's the whole interval training.
HIIT training.
HIIT training, right? Or what we could say more of a vigorous type of work, right? So for those that are not too sure what HIIT training is, it's basically high intensity interval training. The idea is to take your heart rate, again, let's talk about that maximum heart rate of that person has. You go from under the moderate to all of a sudden high, right? High could be anywhere, depends on the person, but usually when we categorize it, it's above 77%. This is all based off of American College of Sports Medicine. So above 77% can take you to the high intensity all the way to 100% of what you can do, right? And when you do interval training, it's usually a shorter duration. Why? Because you're expending a lot of energy, you're expending a lot of effort, your intensity is a lot higher, and not too many people can sustain high interval training for a long time, right? But that's what's cool about it is it goes down, you go back up, goes down, go back up. And so it does have an effect in the cardiovascular system in a very positive way. And the steady state versus HIIT, there's always like, well, which one should I do? There's benefits for both. And it all comes back to what works best for the individual, right? But those are usually the two types of cardiovascular training activities that one could participate in, right? And it all becomes down to like, what do you like to do and what can you actually do?
What are the ways to determine, like you talked about maximum heart rate, right? You know, what are ways to determine maximum heart rate, and what are like the formulas that we run from ACSM, American College of Sports Medicine, and NASM? What are the formulas that our viewers can look at for, or that can calculate to start helping themselves out, determine a maximum heart rate, a steady state heart rate? Because again, every single person is different. We have some formulas for you, and we can maybe post that on the page and put a picture down for the formula. But what are some of the formulas that we can utilize for, let's say, maximum heart rate?
So for maximum heart rate, there's a couple of ways nowadays, right? One, there's the generalized, where you can take a formula. There's a formula. You take the number 220 and you subtract it by your age.
Generally, right?
Generally. So let's say I'm 20 years old. I'm not 20, but 20 years old. 220, you subtract it by 20. So theoretically, your maximum heart rate is 200 beats per minute, right? That's how we measure heart rates, is time within a minute. How many beats can you have in a minute? So you take that 200, and now you say, well, what's my moderate intensity? So you multiply 65% of 200. That will give you what that heart rate is, and that will be your bare minimum. So that's like, I don't know, 110, something like that, right? That's one way. Number two, you can now get technology, smartwatches. Wear it. It's going to monitor you, and it could actually potentially give you what your maximum heart rate is.
Yeah.
Right.
And with the monitors that I have 2 of them on my wrist, but
you got some on
my ankle. Put it up here. But,
that's a different monitor, bro.
There's these monitors that we have. You know, they get pretty damn close to it, but again, it's still estimated. Like, there's ways to get tested, and I'm gonna throw out DexaFit right now. DexaScan. They have scans that you could do it to be even more individualized. And probably, in my opinion, one of the best ways to do it is actually getting tested, VO2 max, and I think at San Francisco State they have that.
Yeah, we do.
Do the kinesiology program?
Yeah, we do that in the kinesiology program. Actually, as a kin student, you're gonna have to learn how to do it.
Yeah.
But what that is basically the third way is to actually go through an actual physical exam.
Yeah.
Where you will get challenged into the most your heart can pump in a minute. So it's either going to be on a bike or a treadmill, and we ask you to max out and see. And while you're maxing out your effort and activity, we're monitoring how fast your heart is beating in a minute.
Yeah.
And then it'll give us a reading of like what's the most your heart can do.
Yeah.
So in most cases, most people cannot sustain 100% of what their max heart rate can be.
Yeah. Yeah.
So once you get to that point, it starts dropping.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So, but there's protocols that we do so that we could understand what your maximum heart rate is. Going back to a more practical, the 220 minus your age. There's also one formula called Carvonin method, and what that is we take that 220 minus your age, then we also subtract your what you call your HRR. You take the 220 minus your age. It gives you your maximum heart rate. To make it more individualized, to understand like how this actually works for the individual, we take a person's resting heart rate. Okay, so whatever your resting heart rate is when you're at rest, truly at rest, and we subtract it from that value, which gives you heart rate reserve. Okay, and that value right there is more usable for the individual when understanding like what your ranges should be with moderate and vigorous intensity. Take that heart rate reserve, then you could take the 65%, multiply that, and then add back the resting heart rate, and that actually gives you the proper moderate 65% heart rate intensity for the individual. Okay, again, we could put that on.
It's a little bit more detailed when it comes to the percentages.
Right, but
so that's something that you guys could use, and we could we'll have that maybe a little. We'll have the formulas out there for you.
Yeah. So with those, the reason why we want to know those, it actually can help determine if you're working at the right intensity for your cardiovascular exercise, right? I mean, at the end of the day, I tell my clients, well, if you're doing cardio, if you want moderate, you should be able to still talk to somebody, but you're breathing hard.
Yeah.
That's usually...
So we're doing
right.
this workout right now, and I'm fucking kicking my ass, but I'm able to have a conversation with you.
But if you're not able to talk, exactly. If you're too out of breath, then that means you're really going high intensity. But I mean, those are the most just easiest way to know if you're doing it.
Yeah.
Okay, and then again, when it comes to moderate intensity, you got to be able to sustain it.
Yeah.
For 30 to 60 minutes.
Yeah.
Most high intensity work.
Not gonna be able to sustain.
Not for too long. I mean, there's some that can, high, some of these elite athletes, they can go a long time. But the general public, they have to work up to it. They have to work up to it.
Now we talked about DexaFit. That's something that me personally, I'm a guy that needs to see my numbers and be a little bit more accurate on where I am, because with DexaFit, they do all of the VO2 max, they do how much oxygen you're uptaking. We're going to get into all of that, EPOC, all of that, and what we need to be recovering at. But in a nutshell, we need to understand the prescriptions for each person, for each individual. And no matter how you do it, whether you start using the formulas or you get something a little bit more detailed like DexaFit or DexaScans, and you decide whichever route that you want to go, understand that there's a process that you have to go through before overtraining, overexerting yourself, right? So what are the exact prescriptions per person that we need to cover? Sure.
Right? So again, going back to moderate intensity versus high intensity, right?
So let's talk about first then the person that has never really worked out.
Never worked out, right? So literally, someone who hasn't been active at all can actually already create a benefit for themselves by moving for 5 minutes.
Right? And I normally say 10 minutes, but 5 minutes.
Well, yes.
But
no, actually, again, going back to ACSM, they said 10 minutes at a time. But I've had clients where man, they barely move. So 5 minutes, they were already challenged, right? But 10-minute increments are what's recommended. The total, if they can, targeted for moderate intensity is about 150 minutes a week. So if you break that down, right, 5 days if you can, you could have 2 days of of recovery. 5 days, that's 30 minutes at a time of moderate intensity. Again, walking, cycling, swimming. It doesn't have to be that intense, right?
Yeah. Now that's when we even say swimming, some people might say, "Oh my God, I got to do breaststroke, I got to do butterfly."
Right.
Water aerobics, walking in the water, just walking in water, because there's resistance there. That's going to pick your heart rate up, right? And you'll be surprised on how hard it is for some people to just do that, to just even walk in water, right? So doing that, even walking in sand, right? Sand at the beach, or if you guys have a beach that's near you, right? And at a park. Yeah. Those little prescriptions. Now, this is coming from ACSM, right? My thing is habit forming, right? And I hate to personally say, take 2 days off, because when I think of habit, I think of habit has to be every single day and getting used to it and doing that for a 3 to 4 week time. Because what do they say? It's normally it takes about 20 days to get into a habit of something. Create a habit for yourself, right? And there's a book out there of The Power of Habit, right? I think that's what it's called, right? The Power of Habit. Utilize, if you want to look that book up, that will actually help you be able to understand how creating a habit can make these long-lasting changes. And even if it is 5-10 minutes, at a time, that can make a huge change for you for the rest of your life. And so those are the habits that we're trying to create, right? And when we think about how that transfers into, making it harder for yourself, because our body is very adaptable to the point that things start to get easier and easier. Sure. And in our case, what we need to talk about is how we need to make that harder for somebody, right?
Right.
From 10 minutes, it expands. It gets a little bit harder.
Yeah. So again, that's what the target is for moderate, is to eventually get up to 30 minutes at a time, maybe even 60, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have the process of progression based off of the individual, right?
Yeah.
So the individual, and that's the thing, right? This is more generalized, but when it comes to the individual, we always make the adaptation based off of what their lifestyle allows and what they're actually willing to risk, right?
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
much time can they put into this? Hopefully, they're at the mindset that I have to put time into this every day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But, we tend to get flexible with some of them and say, all right, why don't you go, again, 10-minute increments,
Yeah.
maybe even 2 to 3 times a day.
Yeah.
Right? Whatever works so that we get their body moving.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The other option is the high intensity work.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the recommended values for that is 20 to 60 minutes at a time, totaling 75 minutes a week. So it's actually
So
less.
high intensity exercise for per day, 60 minutes per day?
20 minimum,
Uh-huh.
60 max, 75 minutes total for the week, which is half of the moderate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why do they prescribe it that way? Well, because there's been studies that show a full hour of moderate intensity exercise versus a 20, 30-minute HIIT is almost, it equates to about the same benefit. Cardiovascularly, caloric expenditure. Okay, there's other things why the high intensity has benefits, but let's just put it in the simplest form that the longer you go with moderate, it's almost the same as if you went high intensity at a short period of time.
Yeah.
Which, if you think about it, we're talking about lifestyle. If you have a lifestyle that time is an issue.
You don't have time now.
Then guess what? We're going to make you do high intensity work because now it only takes a little bit amount of time, right? So it all depends on the individual. But there's your options.
Yeah.
You can do high intensity work or moderate intensity. Again, comes down to time and effort. Comes down to that and dedication and creating these habits. But those are the things that you can do. Some of the high intensity work that we can do is sprinting. On the track, grass, sprinting on the cycling bike, right? Taking HIIT classes, right? Whether it's CrossFit or just Orange Theory or
Base Camp, or
get some exercise, to get some weights and different type of agility drills, and do each exercise for at least 30 to 45 seconds, right? And then give yourself like a 30 to 45 second recovery time. Whatever it is, however it works. There are options, and those are the two primary options that most people can get into.
Yeah. Now, with the type of business that Shift is in, that we're in, is, if we're in the area of allowing people to continue to perform at where they need to be, right? We have a movement pyramid that we look at, the functional movement pyramid that we look at, and we lay right at the bottom, which is, foundational movement patterns, right? That will allow you to get to, to allow you to continue to do HIIT exercises. And then at the top of that is your skill, right? Whether you're trying to just live a life and play with your kids or play a sport, whatever it is. But we're down at the bottom of that. We're trying to create the most foundational movement patterns for yourself, right? And these are foundational things, right? With cardiovascular, knowing your numbers and where you're at with your numbers. Those are all foundational for us to be able to give to you, provide for you guys, right? As foundational as we can get, as we could possibly get. But we are more in movement prescription.
Yeah.
Now, what are the risks that are involved with just jumping into high intensity? Because you're saying you've jumped into the area of, hey, now if you don't have the time to do moderate exercise, what do we have to do? Because this is where most people lie.
Yes.
Most people lie in the area of, I need to kick my ass twice, 3 times a week just to get the benefits of my exercise, because now we're too constrained on time.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
what are the risk factors that are involved with that?
Well, in a lot of cases, and that's why people, the general public will end up, well, sorry to say this, but there's a high risk of failure in getting into some kind of exercise program, even with cardiovascular training, is because most of the time, number one, they don't know what to do. So they're not seeking out for professionals, right? Why? Whether they don't want to pay for it or they just want to do it on their own. The second thing is they're not physically conditioned. Meaning, if you came to me and you said, hey, I want to train for a marathon, but you haven't ran in a long time, am I going to make you run 5 miles right away? Probably not.
Yeah.
Right? So you're not conditioned to do it. That means your connective tissues, your joints, your whole system physiologically is not ready to do that type of work. So, and you're like, well, don't I just start so I can get conditioned? Yes, but there's a way to do it, right? And then number 3, for those that have gotten and started, some of the deterrent is they start feeling sore or they get hurt. So injury, right? And it goes back to not knowing what to do. They're not conditioned properly. Therefore, they're going to just keep going until they get hurt, and then they get hurt, and that's it.
And it's,
All right, well, after you get hurt, what are you going to do? Okay, probably going to go call my physician and say, hey, doc, my knee hurts. Why? I started running. Okay, go take some ibuprofen and rest.
Stop running.
Stop running.
Stop running.
Right, stop running, right? Stop running. Depending on the people, if they're really into it, they'll probably get back into it in a couple of weeks. But a lot of people, here's my excuse now. Here's why I'm not going to do this. Because my knee is messed up.
Here's my way out.
My knee is not working for me. A year later, they come talking to us saying, oh, yeah, I can't do anything because my knee hurts. Dude, that was like a year ago.
Right now, we've talked about the prescriptions and where you need to be. And I would highly recommend you guys get assessed for all of that, right? You guys get checked to see where your heart rate max is, right? Where your heart rate max is, where your heart rate reserve, heart rate recovery. Those are all good tests for us to check, right? And we'll get into how EPOC works as well. But
what, Tupac? No, I'm just kidding.
But we've learned about the different ideas that we can, different prescriptions that we can go through, and what it comes down to is your assessments, knowing what the individual, where it comes down to the individual, and how a person can create lasting change in habit, right? Because we're trying to make lifestyle changes, not just a quick, hey, I got to get ready for the summer, right? This is lifestyle changes that are going to affect your heart health for the rest of your life, right? And then the other thing is, now we've talked about the different prescriptions and getting assessed, but we also have to take even more of a step back into our movement assessments, right? We've said before, and we'll say it again, movement is medicine. Movement is the medication that we want to take, right? Rather than taking a pill or that simple and quick, easy fix, we have to get off our ass and move again, right?
100%.
We've got to do things that are going to be able to keep us moving, because that's what our body is trained to do. That's what our body is meant to do. And so where we come into play again is the whole movement assessment, right? Taking a step back from just the prescription, but understanding where we can possibly decrease the risk of injury, right? And injury is probably one of the hardest predictors that we could possibly take, but what we do here is we want movement in all phases from our toes, our foot, our ankle, our knees, our hips, all the way up the chain. And if we can understand where our movement dysfunctions start to lie, we can hopefully decrease the risk of injury, right? We can also increase our ability to perform at a higher level, right? And that's what our goals are here too, is to continue to optimize your performance, optimize your movement patterns, so that way whatever performance levels that you're at, and again that comes back down to the movement pyramid, whatever performance level you guys are at, whether it's training for a marathon, training for an Ironman, or training for whatever it is, you guys can continue to keep training, continue to keep moving, so that way you guys can get to the top of that pyramid and perform at your highest level, which is your skill, your sport, your life, living your life, playing with your kids, whatever it is.
And that all ties into having a healthier heart.
Exactly. Exactly. So that wraps it up for today, you guys. Thank you very much for joining us. We are the Move Better Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Joe, and this is the Professor John from SFSU. We're going to be here to answer any questions you guys have, any comments you guys have. Put it down in the comment section. Be sure to subscribe, follow us on IG, Network Exercise Solutions, Spine Health Functional Therapy, Shift_movement on IG. Thank you for joining us, you guys. Hope you guys enjoyed. We'll see you guys later.